Hi there, this is Gabriela Vega. I am trying my very first Facebook Live event. I'm so excited to be here with you. I am doing this Facebook event because I want to share some information with all my friends and family about the immigration system. Before I get started, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Gabriela Vega. I am a lawyer in Manhattan, Kansas, and my primary area of work is immigration law. I am myself an immigrant, and I believe that immigrants can help make America great. But right now, there are a lot of facts and myths, myths and fictions about the immigration system. A lot of people share information that isn't necessarily accurate. And so I was hoping that today I would share with all of you information about immigration laws, and the impact of immigration in our country. Today, I am going to be talking about several myths and hope that they will help you better understand current immigration law. Let's start off with some of the more common myths. And I have decided to divide these myths up into a couple of categories. We want to talk about the types of myths that impact our country as a whole. In other words, people coming into the country, what kinds of myths surround the entry of immigrants into the U.S. I'm also going to touch upon the role of immigrants in crime, the role of immigrants in job creation and wealth, and the role of immigrants in contributions to our government. So hopefully that this program will provide you an opportunity to better understand how immigration system impacts our day-to-day lives. Let's get started, shall we? One of the most frequently used myths about the immigration system is that immigrants are overrunning our country. This is a very common myth. Immigrants are overrunning our country. And a lot of times people think, oh, in this day and age, immigrants are coming over to the U.S. at way bigger rates than they ever have been. Well, I'd love to share with you that this myth is false. In fact, the information and the statistics tell us something very different. For example, from 1790 until 1920, America sustained an immigration factor of approximately 15%. What that means is that of the people living in the U.S. from 1790 up until 1920, 15% of the U.S. population was born in a different country. Currently, our immigration rate is at 12%, meaning of all Americans, only 12% of them are born in a different country. I myself am one of those that was born in a different country. Other myths are that immigrants are, other myths that are presented are that immigrants are uneducated, low-skilled, and building a permanent underclass. Has anybody ever heard this? That immigrants are just here with low-wage jobs and that they don't create any kind of growth or prosperity in our economy. After doing some research on this one, I found this, of course, to be inaccurate. Currently, immigrants are not only starting businesses at higher rates than non-immigrants, but we have evidence to show that immigrants are contributing to the economic development of the U.S. For example, in 2002, there were 1.6 million Hispanic-owned businesses, and those businesses gave approximately 1.5 million jobs to people living in the U.S. Of the Asian-owned businesses, there are 1.1 million in 2002, and of those Asian-owned businesses, there were 2.1 million jobs produced as a result of those businesses. Other myths that contribute to this, that are similar to this myth about uneducated or low-skilled, has to do with the overall myth that the immigrant coming to America does not contribute to the value of the country. This simply not true. In fact, immigrants contribute greatly to our society. They create jobs. They have been pivotal to scientific developments. They have participated in artistic and athletic endeavors, and there has been great societal contributions by immigrants to the U.S. Right now, approximately 5% of the people that are active duty service members are immigrants. Of the Navy, 7% of Navy members are immigrants. Some famous immigrants that have come to the U.S. and have helped shape the fabric of our society: Albert Einstein, Madeleine Albright, Joseph Pulitzer, Irving Berlin, David Beckham, Salma Hayek, Jerry Yang, co-founder of Yahoo, Sergey Brin, co-founder of Google, authors Sandra Cisneros and Isabel Allende, news media magnate Rupert Murdoch, Elizabeth Claiborne, fashion designer, Jean Camus, co-founder of WhatsApp, an application for smartphones used worldwide, Oscar de la Renta, fashion designer, Steve Jen and Joey Karim, co-founders of YouTube, Ariana Huffington of the famed Huffington Post, and Arnold Schwarzenegger, to name a few. One of the most disturbing immigration myths that I see frequently, or that I've heard frequently, including even in our among our government, is the following: chain migration. Ugh, I don't know where I'm going correctly. Sorry about this, people. Chain migration and anchor babies bring limitless number of people into the U.S. How many of us have heard this? That chain migration and anchor babies can bring limitless number of people to the U.S. Anybody? Well, I've heard that myth, and that is very much a falsehood. It is definitely wrong. Currently, immigration laws allow individuals to bring family members through what's called family-based immigration. For people to qualify as family members and receive immigration benefits as a result of a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident, they must be the individual's spouse, parent, sibling, or child. Anybody outside of those legal relationships are not allowed to immigrate based on a family relationship. So people like my grandparents, we could not petition for a grandparent to come in through a grandchild. Aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, cousins, these people are not eligible and are not part of the category of individuals that can become legal through family-based immigration. Of course, aside from the chain migration myth, there's also the anchor babies myth, which is also very inappropriate and hurtful to people. Let's talk about why anchor babies aren't so good at anchoring you to the U.S. People think that if you have you have a child in the U.S., that is enough to remain in the U.S. This is not true. First of all, for a for an individual to grant legal status to their parent on the basis of their citizenship, they must first reach the age of 21. So anchor baby is actually more like anchor 21-year-old. In addition to that, once an individual has entered the U.S. without permission, they must return to their home country to complete the immigration process. And there's a lot of laws that work to counter an individual from coming back right away if they have violated the law by coming in, having a child in the U.S., and the child now being eligible after the age of 21 to apply for their parent status. There's a law called the 310 bar that requires people who have entered without permission to the U.S. to, upon leaving the U.S., be forbidden from returning for 3 years if they were here for longer than 6 months but less than a year. And if they were here for longer than a year, that individual is barred from returning to the U.S. For a total of 10 years. Other immigration statuses or other immigration myths that aren't accurate are that illegal immigrants do not want to obtain legal status in the U.S. Have you ever heard this myth? Illegal immigrants do not want to obtain legal status in the U.S. So that is also a myth, and that is a very, very false statement. In fact, immigrants that come to the U.S. undocumented or otherwise would have greater benefits if they were able to obtain legal status in the U.S. And so the idea that people do not want to become legal citizens of the U.S. or legal residents of the U.S. is not true. What does happen is that with immigration, it is very difficult to have the right to come into the U.S. So there are several categories that allow individuals to come to the U.S. You would have to have either a family-based relationship or an employment-based relationship. And so it is not simply possible for an individual who wants to come here just because to contact immigration services and say, hi, my name is so-and-so, and I would like to come live in the U.S. and become a U.S. citizen. Other myths that are prevalent, myth that immigrants drain federal and state coffers. A lot of times people get concerned because they think that immigrants come to the U.S. and are entitled to receive public benefits. But that is not true. First of all, undocumented immigrants are not entitled to public benefits like welfare, Medicare, Medicaid. And to receive those benefits, under the 1996 welfare law reforms, most government programs require proof of documentation. In other words, proof of legal status in the U.S. Even immigrants who have legally come to the U.S. because of a family relationship or employment, later on, they must wait a minimum of 5 years before they are eligible to receive any kind of benefit. And the key behind the 5-year period, I think, has to do with the fact that individuals can become U.S. citizens after 5 years of holding a green card, for the most part. And so a lot of times they assume that within that time period, people are going to be becoming U.S. citizens. Other information about the impact of immigrants on federal and state coffers. For example, in 2005, the Texas Comptroller reported that eliminating all of Texas's undocumented population, So we're talking about the people who live in Texas who have no legal status to be here. If they were removed from the Texas economy, there would be a 2.1% decline in gross state product. There would be a 2.3% decline in employment, and there would be a 2.6% decline in personal income, among other Texans. Additionally, there are the working population in the country right now. It has remained steady thanks to those born outside of the U.S. In 2014, it was reported that more than 72% of foreign-born individuals in the U.S. were working, compared to less than half of U.S.-born residents. So in other words, 72% of the immigrant population is of working age, whereas the general U.S. population, less than 50% of it is of working age. And so that would account for individuals at the retirement phase and too young to work phase. What are some of the things that immigrants have helped do with the U.S.? Well, they have contributed over $1 trillion in economy, at least in 2014 they had. Those economic impact, those dollars help contribute to taxes. They help contribute to taxpayer-funded services like public schools and police departments. And it is believed that immigrants are helping to keep some of our entitlement programs alive. So for example, in 1950, the U.S. had approximately 16 workers paying into entitlement programs, meaning that people, for every one person receiving entitlements, there were 16 people working and feeding the system. As our population's as our population has aged, we do see a drop in the U.S. Numbers. It is believed that by 2035 there will only be 2 workers for every 1 retiree. Other programs and other information that I've found about this is that there was a study done that found that from 1996 until 2011, immigrants contributed up to $182.4 billion. That's with a B, to the Medicare Hospital Insurance Trust Fund. This is the trust fund, the core trust fund that helps feed the system. So not too shabby. Other myths and misconceptions about immigrants and job creation and wealth are that immigrants don't pay taxes. This is not accurate. Immigrants do pay taxes, and undocumented immigrants pay taxes. A 2017 report found that undocumented immigrants have paid approximately $11.74 billion in state and local taxes per year. The Social Security Administration, so the federal agency that controls Social Security monies, has estimated, or at least estimated in 2010, that undocumented immigrants and their employers have paid $13 billion in payroll taxes. Those are benefits that they'll never receive. They'll never get a benefit of. Other contributions by undocumented immigrants, along with payroll taxes, there have been over $7.8 billion annually contributed by undocumented individuals into the Social Security funds. So over the past 15 years, undocumented immigrants, it is reported, have contributed over 100 billion with a B over the past 15 years. These are funds that they'll never be entitled to receive. Other myths involving the immigrants in the U.S. is that immigrants come to take jobs. Again, this is not true, although they are participating in the economy by being in employment. Immigrants are also contributing by forming new businesses, buying homes, and spending income on American goods and services. From 1990 to 2004, it is believed that approximately 9 of 10 native-born workers, so that means U.S. citizens in the working population that had at least a high school diploma, were able to experience wage gains as a result of the increased immigration. A few others that I'd like to talk about that I think are really important to our country and to us in general, to me in general, have to do with DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or what we are now trying to push, which is the DREAM Act. People often have misperceptions, sorry about that, about the DREAM Act, and we believe that a DREAM Act, or I believe that DREAM Act, could benefit our country in huge ways. So here's some of the myths that I've heard about the DREAM Act. Tell me if you've heard these yourself. One of them is that the DREAM Act students, or dreamers as they're called, are going to cut the line and become U.S. citizens before individuals who are here legally. That is not correct. The wonderful opportunity that we have with the DREAM Act is that we have the opportunity to tailor it as necessary to meet the needs of our country, of the individuals in our country. And so the Department of Homeland Security would have to create a separate process for those individuals who came here as children, grew up here, and are now eligible for the DREAM Act if it is passed. That would not in any way, shape, or form displace those who are already in the immigration lines. Another myth about the DREAM Act: people believe that it's going to grant amnesty to people regardless of their age. And that's not true. The Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, which was initially signed into action by President Obama, has limits on how students can qualify for the DREAM Act or for DACA. So too, every bill that has been presented for the actual DREAM Act since 2001, when it was first introduced by Senator Orrin Hatch, have had limitations on the ages that students can be to qualify. So for example, DREAM Act proposals have shown that have requirements like students must have entered under the age of 15 to qualify. They must have lived in the U.S. for a set number of years. They must have attended school or are in the process of attending school. So these types of requirements for DREAM Act and DACA make it so that individuals who are now coming into the U.S. or trying to come, or who see information on the news saying that the U.S. has passed this DREAM Act, would not be eligible for it. The idea that caravans of people are coming to the U.S. to try to qualify for DREAM Act, it's not true. Well, I hope that this has helped you understand a little bit about the immigration system. I think that there's important things that we could all learn from one another, and I hope that if you have any questions about the immigration system, that you will contact me. I would love to put together a presentation for Facebook Live and for my friends and family and clients about questions that people have, either about the immigration system itself, immigration laws, or even just immigration process. I will be doing new programs in the future, and I hope you will join me. Thank you so much for being here today.